Hello and welcome to the first episode in what I hope is going to be an ongoing mini-series of Black Mirror episode reviews. And I'm really pleased with myself because I've called it Casting Reflections on Black Mirror, which I think is really clever. So Dan, my co-host here, is going to agree with that, aren't you?
Yeah, it's very, very clever. Well done.
As just introduced there, that's Dan. So Dan from Just Football Podcast. So hi Dan, do you want to say hello to everyone?
Yeah, hi, yes, my name's Dan. As Dan mentioned, I'm on the Just Football Podcast. Now, this is obviously completely different from, or completely unrelated to anything to do with football, but I am a big fan of Black Mirror, as you are. So I think that's why we're doing this.
Yeah, so he's my co-host there, and now he's elevated to co-host of this mini-series with me. So, yeah, basically the way this has come about is, and I'm going to treat this as a separate entity from Casting Views, was so in the past, a couple of episodes have touched on things that have linked back to Black Mirror, while not specifically being anything to do with any episodes. And you and I, in the past, when we worked together, have always talked about some of the episodes. And then what was it? I think it was a couple of weeks ago. You messaged me and said, "Have you done an episode on Black Mirror and the tech?" And I said something along the lines of, "No, I think it's too much for an episode." Then you said, "Why don't we do an episode review?" And I said, "Oh yeah, why don't we do an episode review? It makes sense." I think that's how it went, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think it was triggered because obviously there's just been a series of Black Mirror that's come out on Netflix, and there's a few topics that came out that we discussed quite a bit, and then that kind of morphed into this conversation, and we're now here today.
I've not actually watched the new series yet, and I've intentionally now not watched it because when you mentioned this, I thought when we do get to the new series, it'll be a fresh reaction for me. So yeah, no, thank you for suggesting that, and I absolutely love the idea of this. And for everyone listening, the way I think we're going to frame each episode is each episode will be an episode of Black Mirror. I think we'll take a little bit of time just to do a mini review or discuss the episode, and then we'll try as much as we can to discuss the theme or the tech in the episode and how it relates to life, or has it taken off, or has it been mirrored, pun not intended, but I'll take it, in the current day. A couple of things though, what I didn't realise was, one, how old the first series was. 2011.
So really?
Yeah.
So I don't think I watched it from the start, man. I think I was a late starter. I think I only started watching it sort of 4 or 5 years ago, and then binge watched a few series. So yeah, I was a late comer to it.
I think the same here. And the second thing was, when you suggested this, it meant having to watch the first episode, which I find the hardest episode to watch and the most uncomfortable. We'll discuss it. Obviously, we're not going to go massively graphic into detail, and the episode itself doesn't go massively graphic into detail. But just, a warning for some people that these episodes, Black Mirror episodes, are adult themed, and this will have discussion of a specific act with a farmyard animal, which is a statement I never thought I'd say.
So
on
are
a
you
pod.
putting an age rating on this pod? Is that the first time you've done that?
Well, no, it depends. As long as you don't swear and you don't get too vulgar, we won't put an explicit one on. That's the aim. I did mean to say to you before the pod started, just don't swear and be vulgar. But no, I'm just, I think this episode specifically does cover some quite intense subject matter, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And I think with a lot of and we've said this before, but with a lot of Black Mirror episodes, there's Black Mirror episodes which are, an exaggeration of something in today's world. It really, really runs with it to a point where you're like, oh my God, we're not too far away from that happening. And then there's the shock and awe episodes, and this one definitely falls into the shock and awe episode. And as a first episode, I think it really gets you grip.
Yeah. Oh, the other thing about our approach to it, what I do also want to do is, at the end of all the reviews, I want us to come up with our own top 5 episodes and why. Okay. So as we do it. And the other thing I was going to say, do you not find that Black Mirror, I think a lot of people have watched it and do talk about it, but it doesn't kind of feel like it's got that popularity, or people continually talk about it. And it could be because there are so few episodes and they're released so far between. But do you get what I mean? It's not a popular.
Maybe it's because it's on Netflix. I don't feel like it's advertised anywhere. I feel like when I came across it, it was by chance. I didn't even really know what it was, and I kind of watched it. The other thing I was going to ask you, you talk about popularity. I don't know if it's really viewed outside of England. So I don't know if it's a big thing in America or whether it's just a UK type thing. But you're right, it's kind of under the radar and you kind of hear murmurings of it, but not too much.
Feels like the people that watch it love it, but it doesn't feel like there's general. It's like you wouldn't often, if you're talking about TV, Black Mirror wouldn't necessarily be a show that crops up in the conversation, would it?
Yeah, yeah, agreed.
Until now, with the introduction of this podcast, it's going to be all anyone's going to talk about, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, it's groundbreaking podcast.
okay, I think so. I think I've set the scene about how we're approaching it. We're going to do each episode. So, I know you got upset with me last time on the show, so I am going to hand over to you. Guests go first. So you introduce the show, and yeah, we'll just have a chat about the actual episode itself first.
This is where we're going to assume we've got the right episode. We both watched the same one.
yeah.
Right, so the first episode in the first series was titled The National Anthem. The episode was really about a British Prime Minister called Michael Callow, who woke up to some news that, and I believe it was a popular princess. I think it was a member of the royal family who was actually quite popular in the media and in the public eye, had actually gone missing and had been kidnapped. But the kidnapper had some rather random and different ransom demands. So it wasn't the usual give me some money. It was for the Prime Minister to commit an indecent act.
Well handled. I was going to say well handled, but well handled there.
Yeah, it's the next bit. For the Prime Minister to cause an indecent act of sexual nature to a pig, and for it to be broadcast on national television. Oh my God! Sorry, my watch has just gone off. So I hope I think Siri was listening to that. So God knows what it found.
That's the danger of technology. You see.
Yeah. So had the Prime Minister had to commit this act on national television. Had a few hours to set this up, and the kidnapper had a load of demands of how this was going to be broadcast.
So I'm just going to jump in there though, because I did actually find them, because apparently it was flashed up on the screen, but I've actually got a list of, I think, the 7 demands that
go on then.
the abductor did. So as Dan was alluding to, so yeah, basically the aim was for the Prime Minister to have sex with a pig, right? I think we could say it like that. So the abductor had 7 rules. So the number 1 is the act will be broadcast live, uninterrupted, and entirely uncensored on all terrestrial network commencing at 1600 hours. The act will be relayed via a single camera in constant roving motion. The camera must be a handheld camera. Cutaways to other cameras are not permitted. During the act, camera will continually pass around the participants to take in a full 360-degree view, moving closer at regular periods to permit close-ups of intercourse. Approximately 25% of the broadcast must consist of close-up actual view of what the Prime Minister would be doing. The act will take place between Prime Minister Michael Callow and 1 live female pig. No other individuals are to be permitted to assist the Prime Minister. In the event of Prime Minister Michael Callow failing to achieve and maintain, let's say, excitement, transmission will continue unbroken until such a time as he does achieve that. The soundtrack will be relayed via a single boom microphone. And yeah, the broadcast will terminate upon fruition.
Good use of a word, fruition.
Yeah, well, that actually came from the website I use. So I was quite grateful that's how they said it. But yeah, sorry. So those were the rules. Apparently, they did flash up on screen, but I didn't catch them.
No, I didn't see, but they talk about a couple of them, like the moving camera, but I don't think they mentioned all 7. So that's good to know. So the episode is really then the Prime Minister and the government trying to control the message that's going out nationwide, and also to kind of obviously hunt down the kidnapper and get out of this act, or trying to fake it, or try to do something where he obviously doesn't have to go through it. But as the episode goes on, I like the bit where they try to get the actor in, because I'm not even convinced they told the actor what he was going to be doing.
Yeah, so they tried to get a porn actor, didn't they? I think it was. Yeah, and they were going to superimpose the Prime Minister's head on him, wasn't it?
Yeah. So that idea didn't work, and it got closer to the time. The guy was never found, and then he went through with the act to the pig. But I think the real kicker, and I don't think the public ever really knew this, or he didn't ever know this, is that because everyone was so embroiled on watching this on TV or on the internet, the streets were pretty empty. The kidnapper actually released the princess half hour before 4 o'clock, so at 3:30.
Yeah.
So obviously, if she was found and identified, and I think that was one of the points the guy was trying to make, if they weren't so obsessed with this act, they probably would have found her naturally if they were just living their everyday lives. And I think the kidnapper then kills himself, and then it kind of goes a year on, and everyone seems to have recovered from it, but there's obviously some long-lasting effects.
Yeah, just a couple of other things to mention. So, like you said, the kidnapper also at some point. So basically, yeah, if the prime minister didn't go through with the act, he was going to kill the princess. So one of the things that happens is when they get that actor to potentially take the place of the prime minister, it then gets leaked. Somebody takes a picture, the abductor finds out, and he supposedly cuts off a finger of the princess, doesn't he, and sends it to the prime minister, but that turns out to be a fake. And then, yeah, as you said, the real kicker is that he lets the princess go because they also try to do a raid on a place where they think he is, but then it turns out it's just a mannequin and a journalist gets shot. That was just that there's a side note there. The journalist gets shot. And I'll bring that up later. There's a reason I'll mention that. It's an episode. What did you think? For me, I know you've got to suspend disbelief in this, and especially in some of the more tech based versions. But the only thing I kept thinking when I watched it is one is, could an artist, because he was an artist, kidnap the princess?
Yeah.
And it's a silly thing to say because it's ultimately it's just a means to an end. It was just I think the actor who played the prime minister as well played him really well, didn't he? In the turmoil he was going through.
Yeah, because he was really on a roller coaster throughout the whole episode, and I think he played that part fantastically. The fear, the angst, the anxiety about having to do what it is and trying to do the right thing. Yeah, I think he got that role spot on.
Because his wife was obviously saying you can't do that, and he was saying I won't, and then quite rightly he's saying no, we can't do this, and then it was like one of his people, that woman, she goes to him, look, if you don't, we can't guarantee, or you won't be given protection, or your family won't be given protection, basically from the public, wasn't it? If saying that if he doesn't go through with it and the princess gets killed, he's going to be fair game, which was dreadful, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then yeah, the other key thing. So like you said, at the end he does it, he goes through with it, and they cut to a year later. And two things stand out. I love because one bit is there's that scene where he's at like a school, isn't he, playing football, and he played that really well, so awkwardly. We've seen these politicians go and pretend to play football with kids, and I actually think he acted that perfectly. But secondly, yeah, it finishes. He's actually, I think his approval rating is higher than it was previously, but it finishes with him in the house and his wife just walks off upstairs and leaves him. So it's obviously had the effect on his marriage.
Yeah. That's an interesting one, isn't it? Because could you? It's obviously a unique scenario, which we assume, but no one ever really finds themselves in. But you would think there would be an element of understanding of what he went through and why he did it, and he's trying to save someone's life. Does she see it as being unfaithful, or does she just see it as completely damaged any sort of like physical attraction that she has for him? I don't know. I found that I'd quite like to explore her thought process. Like, if you could ask her some questions afterwards, exactly why she's so angry. It's that bit I found quite interesting.
I think it's the humiliation aspect of it. I think it's she probably can't look at him the same.
Yeah.
And, it's obviously because it was an animal. Now, interestingly, I was looking at some things, and Charlie Brooker, the creator, actually said he went through a list of animals or what could he use. And at one point, he was even considering a block of cheese, which would be interesting. But yeah, I think that to me, again, I've used the word kicker, but at the end is really bad because the guy was in such a terrible position, and he'd done what he had to do, didn't realize, obviously, it was going to be all pointless, but he did what he did for a nation, and yet at home.
What I didn't understand, and and when you read out the rules, I was interested that this was excluded, but why it had to go on for a whole hour? Because I think the length of time he was doing it was mentioned, and it was about like an hour. He was
Or maybe it was that it could only be up to an hour, maybe because remember the abductor was letting the princess go half hour early, so maybe
Yeah,
if it wasn't a set time, chances are she may have been found before it
yeah.
started. I didn't make too many notes because, as I said, I just find this episode so difficult to watch. There was a comment, and I don't know if it's his wife or someone that's in his cabinet, but there's this line, and this line has stuck with me. And I think they said, "Look, it's no humiliation. Nobody will care." And this person says, "I know people. We love humiliation."
Yeah.
And that stuck with me. When you saw everybody just glued to the TV.
And there is an element of that, isn't it? And I guess that's one of the key underlying things of the episode is, things that attract people to watch and to look. And I think at the start there was a survey up, and they were doing like kind of notes or statistics at the start, and it came up and said that what would people's engagement be if this video went ahead, and it said 25% would watch the broadcast. And you begin to think to yourself, 1 in 4 people would watch that. That's quite a lot. And I think by the
Yeah,
end, that got more and more, didn't it? Because I think the impression was that everyone watched it, and
yeah, yeah,
and like the public interest. And there's a mixture in the public interest of people that felt empathetic and felt remorseful and were really hoping for the safety of the princess. And there was an element of the public which were just entertained by the whole thing. And that bit I thought was quite interesting, because I think that's what it would be like if this was, this sort of scenario played out in real life. I think people would be entertained by it. It is a bit of a story. You kind of, and to go on to a slightly different point, but it was also a slight toxicity of it. And I don't know if you read some of the tweets that kept on coming up on the screen of what the public were tweeting. There was one tweet that come up, and this is obviously really horrible, and I know it's fictional, but I could kind of see it happening in today's world of how toxic social media is. But one guy tweeted something along the lines of, I hope he doesn't think of his wife because it will put him off, like why he's
right,
doing it.
right, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that's a horrific thing to say. And you're like, but actually, that probably, with how social media is,
I think
that would
absolutely
probably happen.
nowadays. Yeah, yeah, and I think we've seen worse probably on Twitter
Yeah,
in recent time. Yeah, it is interesting because, like you said, the impression was that literally everyone was glued to the screen, and the thing the program doesn't touch upon is obviously this would have gone around the world as well.
yeah.
So you don't know what would have happened there. I mean, ultimately, that is kind of it for the episode because it is quite a short episode. I kind of looked at it, and it's hard to put yourself 12 years ago, right? If you take out the central concept of what happens in the episode, because that is the fantasy element here, I think it's almost nailed on where we are currently because I think they used YouTube, didn't he, to do the video? And I think they said, if I remember right, it was like they took the video down in 9 minutes, but it'd already been
Too
downloaded,
late. Yeah.
yeah, millions of times. And that is true. How many times have we seen something added to TikTok, like a scandal or Twitter, and it doesn't matter when it comes down, someone has already downloaded the video. And there are actually accounts, I can't remember the name and I wouldn't say it, but on Twitter, you can tag in an account and it will download that video and send it to you, give you a link where you can then access the video.
It's unreal, isn't it? And like you said, every single second counts with the internet. And 9 minutes to us is like, we've been recording this for 21 minutes and we think it's no amount of time.
Yeah,
But,
yeah,
they're talking about
yeah,
9 minutes. This video's gone worldwide.
yeah.
It's unbelievable. The one funny bit I thought was just after this was after they were discussing that about how it's already out in the world and how so many people have read it. Then the Prime Minister asked for, so what's the playbook on this? And the guy goes, there is no playbook on this. this is a virgin scenario. And that because they must plan for so many different events and so many
Yeah, yeah.
unreal things to happen, but they obviously never thought of this because it's just so far-fetched.
So twisted, yeah. What else was it? Oh, so on, yeah, and on the YouTube thing now. I mean, I'm guessing YouTube was obviously popular then. It's been around for ages, but now YouTube is almost like a de facto TV entertainment for a lot of children and younger generation now, isn't it? More so than TV. What else did I have? I picked up. Do you know it was a subtle. Well, it wasn't subtle, but it didn't really do anything for the main story. But the cabinet junior or minister, whatever, who was sexting or who was getting nude pics
Oh
from
yeah,
the journalist. So I think that was just an element of to add the journalist seeing things. And I can't remember now if if it was ultimately because of her that they found out about the actor plot. I can't remember, but I just found it interesting because again, it was the use of technology, even then 12 years ago, of sending like nude pics to someone. So the whole element
yeah,
of sexting feels like, we've seen everything that's happening in recent years with like deepfake, etc. And it just felt like it was such a throwaway bit, but with everything we're seeing nowadays, and we have done, again, I can't begin to say now if it was ahead of its time. I'm sure these things had always been going on, but it just felt like a funny thing to throw into the episode.
yeah. No, it did, didn't it? And I think that part of the episode element at the age of when this was produced, because that was a proper flip phone, wasn't it, with a really grainy
Yeah,
photo that got produced.
yeah, yeah. Then, of course, there's the whole thing about polls for the public. Now, Twitter and everywhere is full of polls, and it is now. Now, that's what I'm trying to say. Nowadays, you can imagine a story like that would spread like wildfire. But I'm trying to think back then, was that kind of innovative? Because there were all these opinion polls about whether we should or shouldn't do it.
Yeah,
Would you look down? And yeah, it's people are hooked on giving their opinions now on social media, aren't they?
yeah, yeah. They really are. And there'd be people vlogging that now, and there'd be people talking about it and commentating to it, and it would just become a national live event. And it's quite interesting that one of the guys, they challenged him about, "Are you going to watch this?" And he's like, "Of course I'm going to watch it. This is history." And it's like,
Yes, yeah.
and it's like scary, isn't it? Because it would be an event in history, and as crazy as that sounds, and what it was, I don't know if that was to happen in real life. Do you think you would watch it?
I don't think I could. No, I don't think I could. I just think it's one of those things where, like you said, you'd people. I could see why, because it is something so out of the ordinary and so something so. Use the word historical, but in the sense of it's never happened before and likely never happen again. But it's one of those things that I would then want to unsee, and you can't.
Yeah, yeah. It's quite good. Well, I thought it was quite interesting the way they kind of, when they did the broadcast, they were like, "Please, can you turn your tellies off now?" And they did that really loud screeching sound, didn't they, to kind of encourage people to turn it off.
Yeah,
And the whole, if there's any recordings of this after midnight tonight, that's an illegal offence.
that's it. They
And I thought that was
ratified the
quite
law, didn't
interesting.
they? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But like you said, you can't unsee it. If you've
No,
saved
yeah,
saved the recording or not, you're not getting rid of those images.
yeah. Because we've said before on here as well a couple of times that I think it's recognised that law hasn't kept up with the digital age, right?
Yeah.
So I found it interesting that they said, yeah, that they've ratified, yeah, ownership of that video would be illegal. So you would have to do that, right? It's
I don't know why they said midnight though. I feel like they could have said any recording ever is a legal
they could have said,
offence.
what was it? It started at 4, so they could have said 5 past 5, right? So an
Yeah,
hour, like straight
exactly.
afterwards.
I just can't imagine anyone sitting there Sky Plus and going, right, I've got this to midnight. I'm going to watch it a few times before we have to get rid.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because they could ratify the law there, but around the world, we know laws don't necessarily mean the same thing there. So how can you stop it? And sorry, I need to throw the question back at you then about watching it. Would it be something you'd watch?
I would like to say no, but with the amount of build up throughout the day and the amount of public interest it received, I feel like the human tendency would be that you would end up watching it.
Would you probably start watching it and then would you?
I wouldn't watch it
Uh,
for the whole hour. I wouldn't sit down and get a snack out and maybe a drink and just watch it. I think there'd be a bit of that effect when people slow down on the motorway to see a car
yeah,
crash. I think it would have
yeah,
a bit of that sort of effect where you kind of your natural intrigue would
yeah.
take over.
Yeah, because I think it was interesting, wasn't it, that in the show as well, they focused in a hospital, didn't they, as well? And I think it was almost to show, well, the idea that I took was that these are professionals, and even like a hospital came to a stop. Oh, and actually, that's reminded me. I think so. The journalist goes to the place where they try to do the armed takedown, and she gets shot, doesn't she? I think there was a scene. I don't know if it was filmed and cut or if it just didn't make it, but there was supposed to be a scene where she was lying in the hospital then and needing help, but nobody helped her because they were all watching this thing
Oh,
on the
really?
TV, which I actually think should have been in there.
Yeah, that's a talking point, isn't it?
Because then at the moment, all we saw was everybody watching it, but there'd be no impact. But if you then think about what impact was happening, because this is at 4 o'clock as well, this is during working day. And I think for me, about when I say no, I think what it is because again, I'm going to say it, the actor, and I'll look it up unless you got the name. The actor who plays him just portrayed despair and horror and that distress. He did it really, really well, didn't he?
He did. I think his name was it Rory Kinnear?
Yeah, no, I think actually he is Kinnear, but I think he's Roy
It,
Kinnear's son.
no, it's Rory Kinnear is the name.
Oh, I thought you said Roy, but I think he is. Do you remember Roy Kinnear? We're going on a bit of a side tangent here.
Yeah, no, I don't
Do you
know.
remember? Oh, he was a comedian or a comedic actor back in the day, and yeah, I think that's his son. Yeah, yeah. So that was interesting to find out. Yeah, sorry, I just think he played him so well. That's why I'm clouding my view. So I wouldn't see it because the guy just, yeah, your heart went out to him as he had to do that.
Yeah, because there was a couple of moments where he was kind of celebrating because he thought, right, I've got out of this, and you could see the relief. And then he
Yeah,
quickly gets drawn back in when he realizes, oh no, the guy isn't out that location, and
yeah,
oh no, we can't use an actor. When the finger turned up, and it was, I think he was quite angry, wasn't he? Because he didn't realize the actor had been brought in because he was quite angry that got arranged, didn't he? Because I think that was arranged by the assistant.
yeah. And so where do you stand in terms of, like we said, because it feels like, so like you said, take out again the act itself, but it feels like something that could happen now. We've seen movements on social media where something takes effect. It just needs a seed of an idea or a seed of something being said, and then everybody's in on it. The hashtags trending. It's easy to look at it now and think, oh, it's an obvious episode. But again, I'm trying to think 12 years ago. So what do you think about the whole, you know, could this or could this not happen in terms of something maybe a little bit more realistic, or are we seeing this already?
I don't think we haven't seen anything like this where it kind of advertises an event or a showdown. I don't think.
So what we do see though, sorry to jump in, what we kind of do see, and rightly so in a lot of times, but is often the public apologies where somebody said something or done something and full well they wouldn't apologize, but then social media kicks in and then it's like they're doing it like an apology or retract something because they know it's going to save their brand or it's going to save their image. But if we didn't have social media, they probably wouldn't need to do it.
Yeah, well, there's obviously a lot of that, isn't there? And we talked about it in the football world where you have marketing people who are advising and doing all the social media accounts for these people, so they're now not genuine. And obviously, there's been a lot of news lately of scandals and of people being improper in public eye, and social media has just amplified that unbelievable amount to the point where the perpetrators are in a really bad place. And 10, 15 years ago, it probably wouldn't be public knowledge. It's social media does have a habit to amplify.
Yeah. And everyone's got a voice now, haven't they? Because if you didn't have YouTube, that artist, the abductor, wouldn't have been able to have done this plan because it
Yeah.
needed public opinion, didn't it?
Well, the other example is the day that the Queen passed away, and how social media had a part in like broadcasting that to the world, and how that went around, and things like that. And you look at the difference of when the King before her passed away. Some people might not have found out until that evening or when they got home
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
work, but now it's so real time and so available that actually people knew that had happened before it was even announced.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas, if you go back in time, Now, I'm sure the news would have covered it the last time around the monarch passed away, but the time before that might have been people only realised it when they put an announcement outside the palace. So it's
Yeah,
just
but
completely transformed.
absolutely. You say about the news, but back then we wouldn't have had 5 or 6 24-hour news
Yeah,
channels then either, which we do now.
it'd be on the news at 9, wouldn't it? Or news at
It'd
10
be
or
on the
whatever it
news
was.
anytime, 24 minutes past 8. It's that's the thing. We are just saturated and constantly surrounded by news and information, aren't we? That you just can't,
Yeah,
you know, you just need to open up Twitter once and you'll see a tweet or what's trending. It makes it even on a completely different note. It makes it next to impossible to not find out a football score either if you haven't watched a match and
yeah.
you're trying
Yeah,
trying
because
to
we
get
used to
through a
we
day.
used to do that back in the day, didn't we? Don't find out the result and watch it a match of the day. I think they actually pointed that out in this episode as well, where they didn't announce it to start with, did they? Because they were trying to work out and they were reporting on other stuff, and everyone was watching it, thinking, "Why aren't you reporting this? Why is the news breaking? Is it fake? Is it false?" Because social media had got ahead of the news and was releasing it before the news did.
And it is actually interesting. Okay, again, green screen has always been a thing, and what they tried to do with the actors. But now we've got deep fake. You could possibly easily do a deep fake to not have to make him go through with it now. And is that almost like a precursor to kind of deep fake? It's almost like a reference to deep fake before it even happened.
Do you want Charlie Brooker to rewrite the episode for today's world to see how they'd handle it?
I wonder if he did go back and rewrite some of the earlier episodes, how it would be affected. I mean, kind of what I want to say on this, and again, it is a fairly self-contained episode. Is it is unusual knowing what's coming up in later episodes that this, like I think, like you said right at the start, the only element of tech in this, I know they're not all tech based, but is the like YouTube and Twitter, but it's all stuff that kind of exists. I know later episodes go into fantastical stuff that at the time anyway either was just being discussed about or didn't exist. This is all about human emotion, isn't it? And human interaction, which I find is why it's kind of fascinating. And again, I think maybe why it affected me as much as it did, because it is about you as a person or humans and what emotions they go through. So it kind of feels like an unusual episode in that
And
sense.
I guess it prompts a question. We could probably speak about this for a few more hours, but it prompts a question of how far would you actually go to save someone's life? Because he's obviously he goes through with it because he's believing he saved someone's life. But where is the upper limit? And I guess it depends on who the person is, right? Because I was thinking about that. I was like, would I do this for someone I don't know?
Yeah.
Probably not. But would I do it for my children or for my loved ones? Absolutely, 100% yes. And
Yeah.
it's that concept is where is the limit of what you would do to save someone's life.
That's the thing. I don't think he wanted to, but it's the fact that they then threatened his family or the alleged non-protection against any threats. So he's literally forced into doing this because, okay, deep down he would have wanted to save the princess, I'm sure, but even if he didn't, and say, look, it's a matter of honor and humiliation, and this is, say, it looks bad on England. It's the fact that they said, okay, but any repercussions, we're not looking out for you, and so he's then had to. Actually, something just triggered in my head then as I said that. Do you think it also is more impactful because it is in Britain? It was in London. It's the British Prime Minister. Do you think it's better as a British viewer, or it kind of hits more because it is about our country and our leaders?
Maybe you'd like to think you'd have the same human reaction, whatever country is in, but maybe it just makes it feel a little bit closer to home that it is a position of power in this country. I think another thing the episode did as well, that you don't actually see the pig until just before it happens. And I think when he walks around the corner and sees the pig, it kind of like the enormity of it suddenly hits you in the face, doesn't it? It's like, oh my God, this is
It's
horrific.
real then, yeah,
Yeah,
and it's
it
real.
becomes
Yeah.
becomes real. So that was a bit of a slap in the face for me. It's like, oh my God, like it's a horrendous thing to be doing.
Did you have anything else specific about this episode?
No, I say no, and then I'm going to say something. So maybe yes. I think this episode was a great first episode. So if I go back to like my viewing of Black Mirror, I think this episode would get you hooked because you're now intrigued. So I think it's a good first one to do. probably anyone who hasn't seen Black Mirror, I think they probably feel the same if they watch this episode. I think they'll be like, oh my God, I need to see what happens in the next few episodes and the series thereafter. So, yeah, it's gripping.
I think the fact that all these years later I still dreaded watching it, but not dreaded because it is a bad episode, but dreaded because, again, about the theme. There's a handful of episodes that I'm going to look forward to watching again, and there's a handful of episodes that have stayed with me since I've watched them of this series, and that was definitely one of them. I won't say too much more about the other ones because we'll cover them, but yeah, it's absolutely, what's the word I'm trying to say? As a first episode of a series, that's kind of got everything you wanted, right?
Yeah, no, it really has. But like you said, it's not the sort of thing you go and rewatch because you've watched it once, you know what happens. It's disturbing. You don't need to see it again. So it's some films like feel good films you go back and watch again and again and again. This definitely isn't that, but it's probably just as entertaining.
Right. Okay. Well, that was the first episode of Casting Reflections on Black Mirror. So, as I said, this is going to be a regular mini-series of reviewing Charlie Brooker's Black Mirror series. Let us know what you think. You can get hold of us at castingviewspod@gmail.com or castingviews on Twitter. Anything else you want to say, Dan, before we go?
No, thank you. This has been good fun, and I look forward to talking about the other ones.
Yeah, see you for the next episode.
1, 2, 3, 4. If I want your opinion, I will give it to you. Come on, check what we got, 'cause you need it. Don't make us get a spark and bullshit.